Welcome to a sunny new podcast where I'll be speaking to people from the arts, business and beyond, and shining a light on their stories of success on the South Coast. This week's guest is Dominic Wong, an award-winning global marketing professional who has a passion for creating innovative tourism experiences. Dominic was the first marketing director at the Harry Potter studio tour before his journey took him to Hollywood and beyond. I absolutely love talking to Dominic as he's a true creative and so full of ideas. What's really exciting is that we have a man like Dominic with his wealth of knowledge and experience now setting his sights on the South Coast. We talked about why he created the Bournemouth Writing Festival, how we can build on Dorset's rich literary history, and his vision of how Bournemouth can be rebranded as a cultural destination for the UK and beyond. What's great about Dominic is he's a man of action, and he's also got some great advice for anyone wondering how to get started on a creative project. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's do this. Welcome, Dominic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Great to be here.
Thank you. I have to say the best thing about doing this podcast for me, and it's still quite early days, has just been discovering the unbelievable talent that we've got in this local area. We've got some really amazing people doing some incredible things, and a lot of times in unexpected industries and disciplines, and I think you fall squarely in that category for me. So we're going to talk mainly about the writing festival that you've created today, and then talk a bit more about culture more broadly. But I always like to start by talking a bit about the person and their journey so far. And I think the audience will definitely be interested in the career you've had so far, as I know I was when I came across you, as it's fairly unusual. So your background is in creating innovative tourism experiences. So I just wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about those projects and the iconic locations that you've been part of.
Sure. Well, I suppose my creativity came from my background in marketing, and I've been in the entertainment industry since leaving university. So I worked for Capital Radio, I worked at Disney, and then I went into theme parks and visitor attractions where I worked at Thorpe Park and Madame Tussauds and Harry Potter studio tour. But what I really wanted to do with my life was to create something that came out of my own head. In fact, I met up with my very first boss at Capital Radio a few months ago, and he said he remembers me at my interview saying that I wanted to create something that was mine. Like Harry Potter, that's somebody else's idea. Madame Tussauds has been around for well over 200 years. That's someone else's idea. I've always had this motivation to create something which is completely mine. And I suppose the end result of that is a book, because that story and the words that I write in my book are completely mine. So I lived in Abu Dhabi for a year with my family, opening Warner Brothers World, and it didn't work out for us. We just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't really right for us. So we came back and relocated to Bournemouth. And my wife and I, both self-employed, in the deep end. I was like, right, what do we do now? And so I kind of split my time into different areas. So one of which is having to find work to pay the bills, and that's my day job. But the kind of passionate side of me is creating innovative tourism experiences, as you said. So my first foray into that was a 17-seater bike experience, which I launched on the Isle of Wight. And basically, it was like a beer bike. We have one in here in Bournemouth. And I kind of thought this would work very well if you didn't want alcohol on it, if you didn't want beer. Because I thought children would want to go onto this and older people would want to go onto this, but maybe not necessarily want to have the alcohol experience of it. So that was my first way into this. And I thought, right, how do I make it therefore better than that? So I got a local designer, and we created it looked like a beach hut. It had a roof, it had blue and white stripes. And as I said, there was multiple people could cyclone at the same time, launched it in the Isle of Wight. The Independent newspaper said it was one of the coolest things to do in the UK, actually. So
Nice.
it was really successful. And then, as with most fledgling business, it didn't work. I won't go too much into the details, but the Department of Transport, they reclassified it and basically changed my whole business model, and it didn't work anymore.
But if you don't mind, let's just rewind back a touch, because one of my hopes of this podcast is it's going to inspire local people. Maybe there's kids watching or listening and they're thinking, wow, how do I get into an industry like this? It's not something you're going to hear from your typical careers advisor. I think you were first director at the Harry Potter studio tour, for example. So how did you initially get into that industry, and what kind of advice would you have for people maybe looking to follow a similar path?
Yeah, I think half of it is luck and half of it is hard work. And when I mean hard work, it's doing work experience as much as like free stuff, unfortunately. And therefore that's where you make the networks, and that's when you can start to put stuff in your CV. So by the time I got to university, I'd done lots of work experience. I was actually talking to my 16-year-old about this a few weeks ago, that my very first work experience for free, for what I wanted to do rather than a Saturday job, was actually at a special effects company near where I grew up in London.
That's a pretty cool Saturday job.
It was really cool. Well, it was like I just kind of called them, I think, and I said, look, I'm available for free, for a week. I'm a 16-year-old kid. And I remember painting polystyrene to make grey, so that when they blow up in film sets, it lands on the actor, it just bounces off them. So I tried to do as much work experience as I possibly could, and then I did some work experience at a magazine in London, and I did a work experience in the newspaper, because that was the route I wanted to get into, was journalism, actually.
Okay.
And then through school, that's when I kind of thought, well, maybe the media. So I think a part of I don't really like to call myself an entrepreneur, because I think a lot of people's view of entrepreneur is like 10xing and millions and stuff. I'm not really like that. I'm kind of more of a entrepreneur where I try to create something small for the community, which is nice. Rather, my focus is not how do I exit, how do I get to 10x. That is not. I don't want to be a millionaire. I'm just happy to have an income which pays the bills.
And you're more interested in the creative side of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I've always said that I'd rather, so a lot of my career at Thought Parks, where I launched, helped launch the stealth roller coaster, was when I was at Madame Tussauds. I helped launch Madame Tussauds Berlin, and I helped launch the Marvel 4D experience, and then obviously with Harry Potter I launched that, and then when I was promoted to oversee the studio tour in Hollywood, I did a couple of launches. So I've always been kind of at the beginnings of projects, and then kind of hand it over to somebody else to do the operation. That
must be super exciting though, to be in right up front like that, because I think with the Abu Dhabi stuff, you were actually in that real pre-even opening phase, weren't you, in terms of the marketing?
It's just such a buzz, because it is something new. It's something which hasn't been seen before. So I think, the stealth roller coaster at Thorpe Park was the first time that it was a 0 to 100 roller coaster at launch in the UK. And being there at the start and being one of the first people to ride it, that's cool. That's exciting,
awesome, yeah.
And then obviously Harry Potter was huge, because I started there before they even started building the studio tour, and Harry Potter was still being filmed at the studios, because it's based at the studios where the Harry Potter films were made. So I got to see some of the filming, and then Harry Potter finished and moved out, and then that's when we could start. The bulldozers literally came in and built the studio tour. And that's so exciting, because you're on a hard hat tour, you're wearing high vis, and even in Abu Dhabi, you were walking around the site, and and then you see the progression of the opening and the building work to actually seeing customers come through the door for the first time. And that is what's really exciting, particularly with my own projects. It's that I've built this thing, and then I get to meet all of the people that experience it.
Yeah, that is incredible. And I think when we spoke first, you mentioned you had the honour of being, was it employee number 1 at Warner Brothers?
That's right. So Warner Brothers Leavesden was the new kind of department, and I had the lucky privilege of being employee number 1. So on my payslip I was 0001. So it's great to have that feeling of being one of the first people there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You talked a little bit about how you ended up in Bournemouth. and you're doing some work now called Under a Banner of Schools to You. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can dive into
Sure,
the
yeah.
writing
So I
festival.
divide my time now into three. So I have my marketing consultancy, which is kind of helping theme parks and visitor attractions with their marketing. And at the moment, I'm running a Princess Diana photography exhibition in London. So that's kind of pays the bills. And then I've also, when I came back from Abu Dhabi, I started an agency that helps visitor attractions with their schools program. So in a midweek November or a midweek in March, when families can't go to visitor attractions and it's quite quiet, and I go in and say, look, well, maybe you can attract schools in, and you need an education program to, that's linked to the national curriculum, and I can help you do that. So so I've created education programs for the likes of Blenheim Palace and Manchester City Football Club, up at the O2. And quite a few of them have won awards as well, which is fantastic. So those are the kind of the things I have to do to pay the bills, because unfortunately we've got to pay bills. But then the other part of my time is focusing my passions. So trying to create new businesses, writing, which is what I love doing, and that's where the Bournemouth Writing Festival.
Well, let's get into that in a minute, because as I said, that was how I first came across you in connection to the writing festival. It was only after that I discovered that you'd had this whole other adventure beforehand. So appreciate you sharing that. Before we do though, as people have probably guessed from the title, one of the themes of this podcast is all about success and what it means, and I'm particularly interested in how that evolves over time. What people see as success when they're in their 20s, just starting their careers, often completely different to later on in life. And if we can just start going back, if you think about when you were primarily focused on the theme parks and Madame Tussauds, and then moving to Warner, what would success have looked like to you at that point?
Without a doubt, success was financial and status. And I think we are trained right from an early age through school on the conveyor belt to that success equals money and status. Even from a very young age, kids are asked, what do you want to be? Doctor, lawyer? That's about status, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And therefore, as you kind of go through that process, and it's about, okay, well then you can make money, and therefore you need to buy a house, and therefore you need to have a family, so I think we're conditioned right from an early age that success is all about kind of those tangible things. And then through
social media doesn't help, because that's how success is portrayed, isn't it? It's all about material stuff, like what car are you pictured with,
or even likes, likes and comments, and even within the marketing world, it's about, how many likes have you got, how many shares have you got,
how many followers have you got.
Exactly. And I think it's, in life, we don't need 1 million followers, do we? We need, Jesus said 12, right? But in life we don't need so, if we go back to our kind of roots of cavemen, right, we didn't need millions of people to validate us. So you just need a very strong network that's immediately around you. And then I think, because I think I started to see the light in a way that that it was empty. That validation is empty, and that I needed something else. And I think as I progressed through my corporate world, I got disillusioned with it. And I think, the higher you go up the ladder also, I think you kind of, some people, and this is what I felt particularly, is that I just felt that there was an unfairness. And then that's when I started to actually realize, and I think Abu Dhabi actually crystallized it for me, because actually, what's the purpose of this? Why am I doing this? Is it, and I think, we went to Abu Dhabi because, it's tax free and it's sunshine and it's, but we're far away from our friends and family. So I think, my idea of success changed massively.
Well, I tell you what, let's pause there and we'll come back to what it is now. I think that's the perfect time there, because I know you already mentioned that it was after Abu Dhabi that you landed in Bournemouth. So let's talk about the Bournemouth Writing Festival. It features year-round events and activities to inspire you to write. And what I love the tagline that I'm assuming you must have come up with, being the marketing whiz, inspiring writers to write. So I know when we spoke earlier previously, you mentioned that it's not a literary festival. It's actually about the craft of writing, which I just love, that idea. So could you tell us a bit about where the idea for the festival originated from?
Yeah, sure. So I met with a friend, and she had this idea of, as another kind of independent author, it's like, what could we do to support other independent authors? And kind of bit of a brainstorming. And then one of the things for me as a marketeer, I suppose, is to say, okay, why would somebody come to an event where people are selling books? And I just thought, maybe we need a little different angle on it. And thinking about maybe the authors could impart their knowledge and say, well, this is how I wrote, and this is the kind of problems and challenges that I had, because I can guarantee that hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of other people are thinking about writing a book. These are the challenges that they're going to face.
That's what you really want to know, isn't it? What's the process that these successful writers have? So you've provided that platform where they can actually share that.
Yeah, exactly. And what was so good about the first writing festival is that there's so many people that came, that kind of whole spectrum of where they were on their writing journey, from and I'm meeting hundreds of people a month, and I'm meeting people that haven't even written anything yet, and just said, what, I've got an idea for a book, or I've really always wanted to write a memoir or something, I just didn't know how. And they've come into the community and said, look, can you help me? And that goes from the people who are complete beginners all the way through to people that have already published and going, I'm ready for my next book. And I think when we were devising the program, it was very much focused on, what did I want to know when I was writing my book? Because I'm not a professional writer. I've never done a course in creative writing at all. And it was like, okay, well, this is what I need to know. I need to know about structure. I need to know about plotting. I need to know about characterization. And how do I dig a little bit deeper into that character? And then that's even just writing the content. And then it's like, what do I do now? What about book design? What about, do I self-publish? Do I traditional publish? Because again, we're conditioned into what is the idea of success for an author. It's getting published, it's seeing your book in Waterstones, and that is what we're conditioned to believe. Well, actually, what I found out through 2 years of running the writing festival is that that's not always the path that is right for some people. You could self-publish, or actually you could write for the joy of it.
I was just about to say, and I think that's really important, isn't it? Because we talked before, I mean, these are all very competitive industries, whether it be writing or music or any type of art. So if you are just doing it purely because you want your book to be an Amazon #1 bestseller, you're probably not doing it for the right reasons. You do have to do it for the joy, and just because you got the passion, and ultimately that will, if you get the breaks, and there's always luck involved, lead to success.
I made a conscious decision when I was writing my books that I was not going to market them. And that sounds odd coming from a marketeer, but I kind of thought if I started to market my book, it would suck the joy out of any fun I had out of it, because I'd be thinking, right, I'd be going into business mode, right, how much did I invest, what's my return on investment, if I put £100 onto digital marketing, how many books have I sold? And I just didn't want that. And I just thought, you know what, the reason I wrote this was for joy. And that was kind of my guiding light to say, do you know what, I've had so much fun writing this, and I've enjoyed every moment. Now I've done it, and here's my tangible copy, and I can say to my kids or to whoever I want, I've done it. I haven't just said, oh, look, I've always wanted to write a book. I've done it.
So many people do, right? And they never end up getting there.
Exactly.
So just to make it to that point is satisfaction.
And if people want to read it and buy it and like it or not, then it doesn't bother me. So if anyone would like to buy my book, fantastic. I'd love you forever.
We'll put the links in the description.
But that's not the reason I rate it.
Well, no, and so you've clearly always wanted to write, it sounds like. This has been, I think you already said, it's a passion. Where do you think that came from, that love of writing?
School. And I'll tell you, so many writers, I've got a YouTube channel and I've interviewed writers as well. It all starts from school. And, I think having a passionate teacher is such a key, like with any subject, not just writing. If you have a passionate teacher, that encourages you. So I started writing for fun, and then life got in the way, and I just stopped writing. And then when I was at Warner Brothers, I was traveling a lot, and I was on very long plane journeys, and I got a bit bored of watching films all the time, and so I just got my laptop out and started writing again, and that's when I started to fall in love with it.
Oh no, that's absolutely amazing. And I just wonder, what do you think the other benefits and skills that you kind of develop as a byproduct of writing?
When you write, it's very personal. You have to go into your experiences, because you write what you know about. You know, even fantasy, even science fiction, you're still writing from the experience and the knowledge that you have inside you. And it can be very therapeutic writing. And I know a lot of people that are writing memoirs that have to dig really deep into their past to get the words out, or to get the emotions out, and to get the feelings out. And poetry very much is an emotional process. So I think a byproduct of it is really learning so much about yourself, because any book that you pick up is written by a single person usually, and they are bringing all of their energy into those characters, and there's not a character on the shelf which they say, yeah, I want that character. They have to develop that character, and all the kind of nuances and all the kind of expressions all comes from somewhere in their past life. So I think when you're writing, you're automatically using your experience and your background, and that can bring out a lot of quite negative energy sometimes, but a lot of positive energy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your romantic thriller and then quizzing you about where the inspiration for that came from. But that's probably another podcast.
Well, with my books, I love twists. So I like books that have got twists. I like movies that have got twists.
Yeah, me
so
too.
I always start with the twist, the end point, and then I work towards it. So so I kind of write across genres, which is unusual. But so when you pick up my book, if you pick up my book, hopefully you'll enjoy the twist at the end.
Excellent. No, I look forward to it. And I guess as well, what I was interested in, whether you had any advice, because I think some kids and adults find it difficult to start writing. They probably would love to have a go, but might struggle knowing how to start. And I guess that's part of the inspiration for your festival. But what advice would you have for people stuck in that position?
Just start. That is the only advice that I can give you, is just start. Just put some words on a piece of paper. You don't have to publish it. You can just write, see how you go, enjoy it, and then throw it in the bin if you have to, or keep it, and then it might develop. And hopefully through the writing festival, some bits of inspiration will come out of that. So, for example, we do writing competitions for schools and home educated children. We do writing on the beach. We do poetry hubs. This year at the writing festival, in the bandstand in the lower gardens, we had typewriters where people can come and clack away on the typewriter. So, inspiration can come from anywhere. Even going to your local football game, or walking down the street and seeing somebody which you think, they look interesting, or looking at the shirt, or how their hair. And just put some write some notes. It doesn't have to be full sentences, and just see how you feel at the end of it. If you thought, that was fun, that was interesting. As I said, you don't need to show anybody, and I think that's where people kind of get a bit stuck. They think, right, I've created something, I need to show somebody, and therefore I need to get the validation. And if the validation is, that's rubbish, then you go, okay, I'm not going to try that again. Or you write it for the joy of it and go, do you know what, I really enjoyed that, and then look inside yourself and say, yeah, that's kind of, I quite enjoy doing that, so I want to keep doing that. I'm not waiting for somebody to give me permission.
No, that's brilliant advice. I think for anyone doing any art, to be honest, not just writing. But I just, with that in mind then, what's your goals and hope and mission for the festival? I think it started in 2022, was it?
So the company was formed in 2022, and then our first writing festival was in 2023.
Yeah.
We just had our second one in 2024, and then planning right now for 2025.
Yeah.
So the hopes and dreams of it really is to create a buzzing, thriving community for the writers that are involved, and because writing is a lonely business, right? You have to, you have got a blank page, you're sitting on your own in front of a laptop, and what I want people to feel is that they've got cheerleaders, they've got supporters, they've got people around them that are going to high five them and say, yeah, keep going, you're doing an amazing job.
That community is just so important, isn't it? I mean, there's so many lonely people, full stop, but like you said, writing is by definition, it's an individual activity. So just creating, I think you've got a buzzing Facebook group already, haven't you, with that?
That's right. We've got over 1,000 people in our private Facebook group, and that is, and that's one of the outcomes of the first festival, which I didn't really see, because somebody said to me at the end of it, "So what happens now?" And I said, "Well, I'll kind of see you next year." And they said, "No. You've created this buzz. You need to keep it going." So literally the day after, I created this Facebook group, and then I thought, you know what, I need to keep the momentum going. So I created. Now we have monthly networking group. So the first one was actually on a boat in Poole Harbour. We did a tapas one in October. We got one at Patch, which is the new co-working space in Bournemouth Town Centre. So so we've created this community, and what's fantastic about it is that it's people of all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different abilities, and we all just kind of meet up through the festival and through our networking events and through other events that I'm putting on. And everyone just gets on because we've got a common ground of writing, and it's like, well, how do you do it, and how do you do it, and how did you do it? And it's so supportive, and that's what I love about it, is that it's not competitive. So if somebody's writing historical fiction and somebody's writing a romance, they're not saying, "Oh my God, I can't talk to you, I can't collaborate with you," because one person might choose which book to buy. That's not it at all, because the market is so big. And it's not competitive, because if you're writing historical fiction, doesn't mean that somebody's not going to buy a romance book, No. So the way I see it is a rising tide lifts all boats, and so if we can shine a spotlight on Bournemouth, as you said right at the beginning of this of our chat, is that Bournemouth, we've got so much talent, so much creativity. If the writing festival can somehow shine a light and say Bournemouth is a creative place to be, of doing, rather than the place of being passive, then I think that helps everybody. That helps the community, it helps local businesses, and it helps brand Bournemouth, which is what ultimately I want to achieve. And
that's certainly what this podcast is all about as well. So yeah, full support on this side for that. So the Facebook group, is it primarily people from the local area, or have you started to see reach from outside Dorset? And because I guess ultimately it'd be wonderful if Bournemouth almost became a destination for this festival.
Absolutely, it's worldwide. We've got people from America, from New Zealand, from Australia in that group. The first writing festival, 28% of people came from outside of Dorset. So that's just the first one.
That's a big chunk, isn't it?
It's a massive chunk. And in fact, one person flew in from Albania. The second festival this year, 30% of people came from outside of Dorset. And this is from Wales, from Gateshead, from Watford. And we had somebody fly in from Singapore. So, and this is just the beginning.
Global reach after 2 years.
Global reach already.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I guess when we spoke before, you talked about the literary kind of heritage of Dorset, and the landscape in this area has been the inspiration for some amazing writers. I just had a list here. So I think Thomas Hardy, probably the area's best known author. Jane Austen, frequent visitor, and I think she wrote her last book in Lyme Regis, not too far away. Enid Blyton, who I think a lot of kids have happy memories of, and a lot of those locations are inspired by places, some of which you can almost see from the beach here. Mary Shelley, obviously a massive name, and buried probably only 5 minutes from where we're sat now, which is crazy. I always find that mind-blowing. I think she was only 20 when she wrote Frankenstein, and just such a global phenomenon that character's become. The Bournemouth Writing Festival is building upon all of this heritage. We mentioned at the top, it's not just a one-off event. You've talked already about all the networking and other events, and you've got a Mary Shelley event coming up.
Yeah, Mary Shelley was a huge part of the Bournemouth area, and there's loads of roads named after her. We have the Mary Shelley Theatre in Boscombe.
The pub, of course.
Sorry?
The pub, of course.
The pub, which is right opposite St. Peter's Church, where she's buried. Although she never actually lived here in Bournemouth. She's just buried here.
She holidayed here, I gather, though.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. I didn't know that. But yeah, so on her birthday, we're going to do a celebration. We've got a couple of performers doing a performance of her life. We have a Q&A session from the founder of the Shelley Trust. And we also have Bournemouth University doing a interactive storytelling app, which people can get involved with. And 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 also you forgot to mention two other massive heavyweights authors who Bournemouth is famous for. One is J.R.R. Tolkien, who holidayed here in the Hotel Miramar, and he actually died in Bournemouth as well.
Wow.
And Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote Jekyll and Hyde here in Bournemouth. So you're right, Bournemouth has such an amazing literary heritage, and these world-renowned writers were inspired by Bournemouth, and we're building on that foundation to inspire other writers. So we have Bournemouth University, we have Arts University Bournemouth, we have Bournemouth and Paul College, and then we have what I like to call like an undercurrent of creatives that are in Bournemouth, that kind of, there's dots everywhere, and what the Writing Festival is trying to do is kind of bring them all together and shine a massive light on them and say, this is what's happening in Bournemouth. And those students who, well, hopefully to attract students, and students, hopefully they will leave, but then, to see the world, but we want them to come back to Bournemouth. And hopefully what we can do is brand Bournemouth and say, this is the place of doing, this is the place that we want creatives to be. And that's kind of a long-term ambition of the Writing Festival.
Yeah, I think that's so admirable, to be honest, because I do sometimes wonder what the branding of Bournemouth is. I mean, we've got such an incredible natural resource here, miles of some of the best beaches in the country. And you've talked about this incredible heritage just in writing, and we could probably go on, because I know there's film writers and TV writers as well that are, things like Broadchurch that have been filmed and written by someone living in this area. But we don't seem to be leveraging that history, and I wonder, are you having any joy with working with the council or other elements of the community to make that part of the identity?
I think with the Writing Festival, it's putting a little bit of a kind of push behind all of that, and as me on my own, I can't do that. But as you said, Bournemouth, I think, is famous for its beaches, it's famous for stag and hen do's, and it's famous for where people come to die, right? Unfortunately, there are people who live outside Dorset. That's the place where you come at the end of your life.
Retirement home.
Exactly, and there's lots of care homes. So I kind of think, so what would draw somebody to Bournemouth, kind of in the middle of November? Unless you're coming to the beach, which you're probably not in November, or if you're not coming to a stag and hen do, if you're not coming here to die, why would you come to Bournemouth? And that's where I think culture can be a huge, huge benefit to not only to the town centre, but also to the community. In those dark, long nights, what we want to do is give lots of people in the community inspiration to do something, and hopefully the Writing Festival is just one element of what could be built within Bournemouth that capitalises on the community and the people and the businesses year round.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you about how you think, what's your vision of how that could develop over time, because we've both spent a big part of our life in London where you're spoilt for choice, museums, art exhibitions, everything going on in film and music. It can be easy to take for granted. Down here, we have one of the UK's best arts universities, so that's a massive plus side. But what do you think? What's your vision, and what would your hope of Bournemouth looking like in the future be?
Well, my vision is utilising all of that creativity, all the things you just said, and how do we harness that into something which becomes a brand which makes Bournemouth famous. And I think there is an opportunity to utilise all the skills that we're developing at the universities and all the talent that we have here into helping people have a purpose in life. And I think there's some parts of Bournemouth which have problems and issues and challenges, and I think personally that some of the ways that we can overcome those challenges by giving purpose. And I think the Writing Festival as an example is that if I can get somebody to put pen to paper rather than inject themselves, then that's hopefully puts them on the right path. And this isn't just kind of an airy fairy me saying, oh yeah, kind of I wish we could do this. The Writing Festival has proved that it changes people's lives. People write to me, they speak to me and say, you have helped me change my life. And that is much more powerful than any writing festival. And that gives me the motivation and the passion to say, okay, well, what else can we do? So people might say, well, writing, that's not for me. I've never written anything in my life, or whatever it might be. So what are the other areas within our cultural community that we can tap into? And using that same ethos of the writing festival of doing as opposed to being passive and reading, how do we kind of how do we change the perception of that to say, okay, well, this is really interesting. So rather than, as you said, it not being a literary festival where you come to listen to famous authors talk about their books, but actually the art of writing, what about instead of having a food festival where you go and try lots of different food, we have a cooking festival, and we use all the different restaurants and cafes and all the talent that we have in Bournemouth and teach people and educate people how to cook. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but the Bournemouth and Poole College is the #1 culinary school outside of London. Now, I didn't know that until I met them. And so, you know, that's a kind of a hidden gem. It's like, okay, well, why aren't we utilising that and say, okay, well, we will teach you how to, you know, different elements of food. So, for example, the pizzeria could teach you pizza spinning. You know, the local steakhouse could teach you the differences between a T-bone steak and a sirloin. You know, the culinary school could teach you the different ways to cook an egg. I don't know, you know, I'm just kind of riffing a little bit.
It's such a great idea, though, like you say, and to make use of something that we've got on our doorstep. Again, just makes complete sense. I mean, from a personal point of view, I mentioned to you before, I'm a complete film fanatic, so I'd love to see a film festival in Bournemouth, and maybe, like you say, the twist on it is not just about turning up watching movies, but to actually find out about making them. And again, they're one of the top universities for film production and here. So,
exactly, and you were saying, you know, you're a musician, so rather than have a music festival where you go and listen to bands, well, what about a making music festival where you learn to play the drums, or you learn to play the saxophone, or you kind of understand how music works and how you read music? And I think one of the huge barriers to learning music is that there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of investment in time. There's a lot of investment in money. And you might not enjoy it, so you have to make an investment and go and, you know, and I don't know, buy a guitar or something to think, yeah, you're going to get really into it. Then if you don't enjoy it, then you kind of feel like you wasted. So the idea with the writing festival and all these kind of other silly ideas I have is maybe it's just a taster, and you get to meet the teacher, you get to meet, you get to handle it, and actually, do you know what, this feels right, or this doesn't feel right, and therefore we're kind of encouraging you. And like, who would have thought, if we were to have a making music festival, for example, and so there's a saxophone and a xylophone and a violin, and, you know, and somebody turns up and says, I've never touched a violin before, and they pick it up and they, you know, play something, and it's like, okay, that's quite cool. And then we've given them purpose to say, well, do you know what, I've quite enjoyed the person that was running the workshop, whatever it is, and I'm going to continue to progress it. And that's what I think, what I want to try to achieve with these kind of mini festivals is putting them in the off-peak times of the year where the hotels need the business, where the town centre restaurants and cafes need the business, but also shine a spotlight on the talent that we have here and the amazing community and the ideas and innovative things that we have that we could create if we had a making music festival.
That is incredible. Yeah, it's really exciting just hearing you talk about it. You can almost see this calendar of events going on. Have you got any of those ideas at early stages, or is this at the moment just focusing on Bournemouth, the writing festival, and then thinking maybe a bit more mid-term about launching the other ideas?
I would love to launch those other ideas now, but unfortunately I don't have the funding to do it. I would love to focus 100% of my time on Bournemouth, but unfortunately I have to pay the bills, right? So that's where my other kind of jobs come into it. I think ideas exist on a piece of paper, and then, you know, anyone watching this can steal those ideas, I'm sure, right?
You'd be happy to, in a way, though, wouldn't you? If someone created one of these festivals, then fantastic, we all benefit.
Absolutely, as long, you know, if it's part of a strategy. So rather than, you know, kind of somebody doing that over there and somebody doing that over there and somebody doing that over there, let's work together, let's collaborate, and you know, let's not be, you know, and I suppose where I personally come from is that I'm not a selfish person in that regard. So yes, you're right. If somebody wanted to take that on, 100% off you go and do it. but let's collaborate and let's do things together, because everybody's got ideas and everybody's got energy and everybody's got different ideas and ways of doing things. So, for example, the cooking festival, I might be struggling on a particular way of executing it, but somebody out there might go, well, actually, if you did it this way, and it's like, great. That's where ideas start to formulate and start to happen and become more concrete. Yeah. But, and I think my vision for Bournemouth is very much cultural. And I kind of think that culture is the key to helping all elements of societies. We've touched on it, your mental health, your purpose, your hobby, your loneliness, because there's other people around there that will probably have the same idea. Like with music, I'm sure, so my son plays the drums, but it's very difficult for us to find a band for him at the age he is. So perhaps as a making music festival, we start to discover other people and say, well, do you know what, we need a drummer, or we need somebody like you, or or you kind of meet somebody first before kind of auditioning them, so yeah. I think the writing festival has really proved the concept for me to say, do you know what, this actually works. And I can say it works because those people have developed and those people have improved their lives and those people have collaborated, and look what we've done here in just 2 years.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking myself, if I was your son's age and someone gave me the opportunity to turn up at something like that, I'd absolutely love it. So hopefully we'll see that in the future. Whilst I've got you here, I did want to talk more broadly around the idea of creativity, because when I look at your career, which has been full of amazing achievements and awards, the constant does appear to be creativity in some form, whether it's innovation in the theme parks, going on to your own writing, and now the festival. It's such a massive part of the history of the country. We've exported music and film. We've probably punched way above our weight since the 60s. Biggest bands in the world come from this country. I was reading some government figures about the industry, and just in April 2024, I read that creative industries contributed 124 billion to the economy, and that's equivalent to 5.7% of the UK's gross value added. So a really significant industry in this country. I just wanted to get your take on the overall importance of creativity, particularly as it relates to kids and their education and how it might benefit them.
I think the main thing for me about creativity is that it's not valued. So if you were to hire an accountant and they said, I charge X amount, you pay it straight away. If you asked a painter to paint you a picture and they said it's going to cost me Y, it's going to cost you Y, you're going to go, oh,
yeah,
that's
sounds
a bit much.
Like a lot, yeah.
Like if as a musician, if somebody was to hire you for a gig, imagine, the difference between this is my fee and I'm going, oh, can you do it? This is a great promotion for you, right?
Yeah.
I think creative people have a bad rep because people don't value their output, and that's because there isn't necessarily a tangible outcome to it. So, for example, how many people watching this would pay a poet to write them a poem? I guarantee you, no one would be paying the big bucks. They would pay a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it might be. So I think, whilst the creative industries, all the numbers you mentioned are fantastic, all of those things are tangible things, I imagine, like film industry. And I think because the creativity is such a soft skill, people don't value it. And I think that's why creativity is squeezed out of us at an early age. No dad is going to say, I'd love you to be a painter. It's always a doctor, architect, lawyer, right? So I think, and then, even our politicians are saying maths is more important than the creative degrees are being diminished, right? There's the dance and music and, all the kind of creative arts are being replaced by business and, law and all those kind of things. So I think we've got a big problem from our leaders that creativity is seen as something which is worthless. So that's where I think I go back to, how do we create joy out of our lives which isn't linked to money necessarily? So I think with the writing festival, a lot of our community, they do want to write to be paid and make a living out of it, but a huge proportion of the people that I meet want to write because they love it. And if you were to say to somebody, oh, what do you do? So I'm a writer. Okay, how much money you've made, how many books you've, it's all kind of tangible validation. But actually, can't you just have it as a hobby? Like if you're doing something, it doesn't have to lead to money, which is what we're conditioned to at school, which I talked about earlier on. So I think the creative arts have a problem, and the only way I think we can solve that is by shining spotlights and showcasing the talent, and then hopefully over time, because it will take a lot of time, to say actually there is huge value in our cultural disciplines.
I'm a massive fan of Ken Robinson, who's kind of echoed a lot of the sentiments you've stated. I know I'm not the only one, because his TED Talk, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" I believe it's the most watched TED Talk of all time, something like 80 million
Really? I've never seen
something.
it. I need to watch it.
You definitely need. I'll send you the link. But he says that creativity is as important in education as literacy. And his argument is that because we're living in such an uncertain time where you can't predict the future, we need to be educating kids in a different way, where they've got more creative approaches to problem solving. They're able to adapt to different careers, because that idea of like a job for life probably doesn't exist now. And he said that we are educating people out of their creativity, a bit like you've mentioned already, because most kids start off quite creative. Everyone's happy playing as kids, and then everyone's got pens and paints, and over time when you start getting the feedback that you talked about and people start being more judgmental, it's almost the fun goes out of it. So I definitely think anything like what you're talking about doing is a massive help in that regard.
And that's really interesting. As I said, I hadn't heard of that TED Talk. But I guess the question, therefore, is how do we change it? And I think the path we're on at the moment, I can't see how that changes apart from being creative and trying to find new ways to help children. And, well, it's not just children, it's every single age group, saying there's something else. And hopefully the writing festival is one element of that, where people go, well, do you know what, I'll give that a go.
Yeah, and that leads me nicely on to another theme of this podcast that I find really interesting. It's the idea of happiness, which can come from many different forms. I always think it's strange because happy is such a small word, but actually so complex sometimes in the modern world. So I just wonder, from your perspective, what do you think true happiness means?
Okay. I think happiness is an invented word or feeling that society has put onto us. Okay. And the reason I say that is because what other animal in the world would you say is happy, that judges their life on happiness? Does a crocodile think, I'm happy now? or does a mosquito say, yeah, I'm happy? So I kind of challenge the word happy, because happy is, I think it's an unusual feeling for any animal to have, because it's manufactured in a way. Are you happy? Yes or no? But also it's fleeting. So you can be happy right this second, and then I could be unhappy the next second. So therefore, how am I valuing my life on that word? And the other thing is that we ask other people, are you happy? Whereas humans have a whole range of emotions, and yet happy is the one that we all go to. If a kid has an ice cream, are you happy? Well, he has to kind of answer yes, right? Even if he's not enjoying it. So I prefer the word fulfilled or content, because I think that's more meaty. It's kind of more longer term. So for example, a crocodile, if they've just eaten their food, I feel fulfilled. It's kind of a longer emotion, if you see what I mean. And with writing, writing generally isn't a happy business because it's quite hard, right? Well, life is hard. But if you said to me at the end of me writing my book, are you happy? I don't think that's the word I would use. I'd probably feel I'm fulfilled. I feel that that I've done the best I could possibly do. I've had ups and downs. I've been happy during it, and I've been sad, and I've been frustrated. But overall, I'm content. And I think... I think we fall into the trap of what is happy.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It's the kind of creative perspective I'd expect from you. And that leads us back to where we started, because part of the mission of this podcast is to dispel the myth of similar success. We talked at the top, what it isn't. It's not fast cars and big houses. So over your journey and where you sit today, how has your view of success changed? You said, in the early days, like many people, it's probably financially driven to an extent, but what does success mean to you now?
So I think success falls into two camps. You've got everything you just said about the cars and the watches, and that's validation. That's somebody else saying, wow, yeah, you're successful. That is, again, how we're trained right from the very, very early age. It's what trainers are you wearing? What shirt are you wearing? Have you got the latest football kit? That is all about validation. And from a writing point of view, if you're an author, are you successful? It leads to how many books have you sold? How much money have you made? Is writing your full-time career?
Yeah.
So you have success, which is led by validation, which is likes and followers. There's the other side of success, which is where I kind of saw the light, was joy. And the difference between the two, validation is external. So you're waiting for somebody else to say, are you successful? Whereas joy and fulfillment is internal. So if I'm feeling joy from finishing my book, or feeling joy from the writing festival, or baking a cake, I can feel joy, or I can feel contentment or fulfillment, and nobody can take that away from me. Whereas on the other side, if somebody says, or you got 6 1-star reviews, that's not great, is it? They're taking away, they're taking the power away from me. Whereas if I'm saying, I don't care if I get 6 bad reviews and 100 good ones, I feel good in myself that this is my achievement, and this is how I've measured my success. Now, this hasn't happened overnight. This has taken 2-3 years, because when I went self-employed, I was still in the corporate mindset, and I was like, right, I've got to make success, because other people who probably have never even thought about me in years of, I'm kind of thinking, are they thinking I'm successful? When actually it's over here and thinking, do you know what? Am I staying true to my values? Am I staying true to what I believe in? And that is where I find my fulfillment, because I'm trying my hardest to create a culture within Bournemouth, a new culture within Bournemouth, let's say. There's going to be people, you cannot please all the people all the time. That is a fact. And that is probably the best advice I can give to any single person, is that whatever you do, even if you think it's the best thing in the world, one person is going to go, yeah, that's rubbish. And that's going to affect you.
And that is especially true of the arts, I think.
Because it's subjective,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And, so Harry Potter, the global best-selling, there's going to be some people that go, that's rubbish, or that's not well written, or, whatever it might be. That's somebody taking power away from you, from your creativity, or from your life. And I prefer to switch it the other way. So if I say that, my focus is on family and friends, or trying to help others, and somebody says, well, that's not good, you're not making enough money, whatever. It's almost like, I don't care, because that's the person that I want to be, and that's who I want to become. And so as long as I'm staying true to my values of what I believe in, then nobody can take that away from me. So that's my measure of success.
So many good lessons in that. And I wonder, just to round off that thought then, what do you think are the most important skills that you've learned and developed in order to do what you do successfully?
My biggest, not sure it's a skill, but I'm sure it's also my biggest weakness is that I just get on and do it. I don't now, like before, I suppose I'd wait for permission and say, what do you think? Is that a good idea? Should I do it? Now I just do it. And I've got a point in my life now where I just think, I don't really care what other people think, that I'm going to do it and see what happens. And I've got hundreds of ideas, and sometimes I probably say them out, without thinking, like I did today, like everyone's going to steal their ideas. But I'm a very open person, and I'm kind of feel like, like I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some people, and I was like, talking about all my different ideas, within tourism, not just with the writing festival. And I suppose I'm putting myself out there being quite vulnerable. But if you don't say the ideas, if you don't kind of think they're never going to happen, they're never going to happen. So I kind of feel like, and I'm very action oriented. It's like, I've got an idea, I'm going to do it, right? And my wife hates me for it because it's like, oh God, you're doing something else. Like, just think about it for a little bit. But I kind of think that I kind of believe in something, and I just want to do it, and then see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
If you procrastinate too much, I'll do that tomorrow, I'll do that next week, or I'm not quite there yet, I'm not quite ready, then it's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's like that. I think a lot of people are waiting for perfection, aren't they? But to go back to what you said about the writing, just grab a pen and a piece of paper and just have a go, just get started.
Yeah, and maybe that is a piece of advice is don't think that anything is going to be perfect. Don't think that, like my kids are like this, like when they play the piano or when they try something new, if they're not an expert at it within a couple of hours, then they think they're not very good at it. And I think that is a problem with social media, because they're being influenced by so many people who make it look so easy. And the writing festival is not easy. So I'm doing the writing festival in my spare time, weekends and evenings. It's a lot of logistics, a lot of work behind the scenes, and I think a lot of people don't realise that. So I think just do stuff.
Great advice. And I always finish with a feature I call Life by Misadventure, because I'm a real believer that you learn so much off the beaten track, outside maybe of your daily work, whether it's things you've learned like I have from being off playing in bands, or from team sports or activities you're involved in. So I always ask my guests, what is a lesson that you've learnt from an unexpected source?
I think Abu Dhabi was a huge lesson for not just myself, but for my family as well. In that we just we thought we're just going to do it and see what happens, because we might love it, and it could be the answer to all of our hopes and dreams, and it wasn't. So I think, to answer your question, failure is not a bad word. I think at school we're conditioned that failure is a horribly bad word, and you shouldn't fail, which the opposite of failure is perfection. And I kind of think that we need to be better at failing. And I think the steepest learning curve for me was Abu Dhabi, which on some measures was a failure. On other measures it was a success, because we actually realigned our values and we kind of said, actually, this is what we want to be doing. But also the beach bike experience, which I did, was a huge personal failure, because I went into it with a corporate mindset, and I was a one-man band operation. And I think that the difference between the two was humongous, and I learned so much between those two things that's all of that learning is taken on is evident in the writing festival, because I didn't think, right, I need to be huge and corporate and long-term thinking in the first one. I just want to do it and see what happens. So I think failure is a really good thing for everybody to have, right from an early age all the way through to the end, because you're understanding your weaknesses and you're understanding the gaps in your knowledge, and you can only know those by failing.
Yeah, no, great answer. I'm always telling people my favourite kind of quote on this idea is, there is no such thing as failure. There's either success or learning. which I think is pretty much what you're saying with that. So completely agree.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the word failure is a swear word for a lot of people. You know, if you used to say to somebody very successful, you know, you're a failure or you failed at that, it hurts. You know,
Yeah.
so it's a label, a bit like the word happy, which kind of has good intentions behind it, I suppose, but actually can be quite hurtful. So I think training children at a very young age to fail is actually a positive.
Well, sadly, that brings us to the end. It's been a brilliant chat. When I first came up with the concept for this podcast, I really wanted to focus on the arts and creative. So it's brilliant to have you here. I didn't want it to be another grey business podcast. So if you don't mind then, what are the best links for people to keep up with you and some of your projects?
Sure. So the Bournemouth Writing Festival.co.uk is the website for everything. We have a YouTube channel. So if you search for Bournemouth Writing Festival on YouTube, you can find everything there. You can find me on LinkedIn, and, you know, I've got a website, I think it's Dominic Wong marketing.co.uk. If there are any people that would like my marketing services to help me pay the bills and fuel the fire of my passion of creating culture in Bournemouth. So yeah, please do link me in.
Brilliant. Well, Dominic, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's absolutely amazing to have someone like yourself in the area with your experience and actually trying to make Bournemouth a destination for culture. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.